Welcome to the first edition of Side Quests. Bill Tucker here with A Gamer Looks at 40, and this is a compilation episode. There's going to be a bunch of these. Throughout the course of the interviews I conduct, there's lots of little anecdotes and opinions that are really good and interesting, but they just don't either fit into the episode or make the episode too long. So Side Quest is a place where I combine a lot of these anecdotes and put them into one place for your listening enjoyment. So expect a lot of these as I move through this project. So let's get started with visiting with Shaan as he tells us not only how to master Space Invaders, but how to get free games at a retro arcade cabinet. Cheating! Stealing! We start off with the bad stuff here on The Gamer Looks at 40 Side Quests, Volume 1.
Okay, well, here's the way that I learned how to get really high scores in Space Invaders. So, there's like a grid, right? And it's about, I want to say 6 alien rows by about 10, I think. Maybe it's 12. Okay. Well, anyway, what you do is you basically knock out the middle 2 columns. So you knock out the middle 2 columns, and you just let the invaders get to the very last row before you die, because on the very last row, you can actually go right underneath them and not get shot by the missiles they do. There's like a gap, and that gap is big enough. So you go right down to them, and then whatever direction they're going, you go that direction to the end, come back, hit them all, then go back to the other end, hit them all, and then go back to the middle and wait for that to happen. You just repeat. As there's less invaders, they move a little bit faster, right? So when you get to the final row, it takes a little practice, a little timing, but then you go to the direction they're in, hit all 4, and then you go hit the 1, 2, 3, and then you move as fast as you can because it's going really fast, and you hit at the very end. And if I could show you this, in person, it'd make more sense to you.
Right.
But if you get that down, you can basically beat any level. You can go forever.
Wow, that's so interesting.
We had a name for it. I think it was called Cowboy, but I'm not positive if that was the name.
That's like a chess thing, like a chess strategy. Well, I'm going to employ the Shirazi, Shirazi defense.
If only there was a Donkey Kong's Gambit on Netflix, I could be in it. I was actually never that good at Donkey Kong. I was good at Donkey Kong Jr. I like that one a lot better.
Donkey Kong Jr. is an underrated game. It's super fun. It's got a lot more. It's got more verticality to it, obviously. So yeah. I actually really enjoy Donkey Kong Jr. Probably a little more than the original Donkey Kong, I think.
Okay, so let me give you some other knowledge. So, of course, being kids in Hawaii, we also had things to do to get free games. One of the classics was drill a hole in a quarter with a string. I'm sure everyone tried to do this. And you could just put it down and pull it back up and get your game. Another thing you could do is you could flick pennies up the coin return slot. If you got good at it, you could flick the penny. It would hit the thing that activates the credit from the bottom, and the penny would come back down, and you could just get free credit after free credit, flicking pennies up the coin return slot.
Get out of here. That's nuts.
Yeah.
Oh, that's so good.
And I don't know how we all knew that, but it just got to be very standard information. I mean, everyone knew.
That's crazy. Oh my gosh, that's so funny. I have to go to, I'm sure it won't work at pinballs anymore with even on their retro games that they don't have the card
you got to use your card now.
Yeah, well, some of them they still don't. They haven't retrofitted all of them, so who knows?
So here's one more secret. Here's one more secret I remember, and this is on the game Tempest.
Oh yeah, Tempest, great game.
Tempest was pretty crazy, and I've only successfully done this once, but apparently, if it hasn't been reprogrammed or whatever, if you get to the score of exactly 99,990 and then die, and I've seen this happen, it'll give you 40 free games.
That's so funny. That's crazy.
I've never seen it mentioned on the internet. I mean, like Tempest 40 free games hack. I've never seen anyone post anything about that. So I'm not sure how we knew it, but I did it one time myself because it's really hard to get that exact score. Because at that point it's pretty fast and it's easy to go over because you have to hit those spikes because it's like 10 points at a time. So you're dodging everything and you're trying to get just 1 point, 10 more, and then when you die at 99,990, you get 40 free games.
If you didn't know, now you know. Stealing games, courtesy of Shaan Shirazi. Next up, we catch up with Moses Norton. Now, it was very interesting that in the first 2 interviews I did for this show back in November of 2020, and yes, that's how long it took to get this off the ground. There's a lot of creative stalling, etc., life. But it was very interesting how the first 2 people I interviewed grew up in Hawaii, or Hawaii, as I should properly pronounce it. And it was just interesting to hear stories of how life was on that island. So Moses tell us a bit about how he used to get games and learn about games on an island that was 6 hours away from literally anywhere. It's a unique story from a unique perspective, from a unique individual, and I mean that in the best way possible. Let's listen in. Growing up in I'm going to say Hawaii. Hawaii, yes. I try. I spent a month in Hawaii. I think I know everything now. But growing up on Hawaii, did you? I know that things can be pretty scarce. You know, you are a 6-hour flight away from anywhere, basically. So how was it getting games and stuff in that area? And how long were you in Hawaii before you? Because I know you're in California now, right?
Yeah, that's right. So I lived in Hawaii until I was 17. And then we moved out here.
Wow. Okay.
So it was quite a while. Oh, shoot. That means, am I at I've lived longer in California now than in Hawaii?
I think you have.
Yeah.
I think you have.
Dang it. I need to move.
Gotta get out of here.
I gotta get out. Pack up the house tonight.
Stir crazy.
Yeah, I know, right? Anyway, so distribution, imports, all that sort of thing, made trying to find games in that state interesting. I got a lot of games from pawn shops. And then Toys R Us was a big kind of once or twice a year trip, either for Christmas, even though my dad didn't really let us celebrate Christmas. We kind of when I was with my grandma, she would take us down there and we could pick something. The first game I remember picking out off a shelf for myself was Mega Man 2. Or no, nice. I'm sorry, Mega Man 4. Man 4.
Okay.
Yeah. Huh. Mega Man 2, Mega Man 4. They're so similar. But Mega Man 4. So yeah, lots of pawn shops, lots of sharing with friends. I do remember sort of going through wish lists and magazines with lists of NES games and be like, I want this one, not knowing anything about them really at all. I didn't have a Nintendo Power subscription. Wasn't really dialed in to anything except for what we were talking about on the schoolyard. So it made it a little difficult, but then at the same time, Hawaii is kind of this interesting border between the East and the West. So there's this fusion of cultures that happens there, many cultures. And so, sometimes you'd go into a pawn shop and there'd be a lot of import games. Sometimes you'd go in and there'd be, all this Japanese merchandise that you couldn't really find on the mainland. So that was also a big part of my childhood. We were talking at a young age about, tricking out our Super Nintendo by cutting out the tabs so it could play Super Famicom games and stuff like that.
Nice.
And I never learned Japanese. I borrowed a couple books from the library every once in a while. The goal was always, I'm going to learn Japanese so I can play these Famicom games.
There you go.
I never did.
Right.
Nowadays, it's so much easier. You could just get a ROM that's already translated, fan translations and stuff like that. So yeah, it was an interesting time. Obviously, I don't have anything to compare it to because I didn't also grow up anywhere else. But that was some of the flavor, at least, of trying to game there at a young age.
Yeah, it sounds exciting though, right? It sounds like you definitely had a different experience than a lot of people on the mainland would have had. Where again, we have, I had the power, I had Nintendo Power, and I knew exactly what I wanted, and my mom knew exactly what games to get, right? So, but it's interesting. That sounds like a lot of this was kind of also like a tribal knowledge, where you were kind of picking things up from friends on the playground and just, kind of discovering. It sounds like that sense of discovery. And really trying to find that cool stuff and mine for it. Sounds kind of exciting.
I mean, well, it was
maybe as an adult, right? As
right,
an adult
right.
sounds exciting. As
Well,
a kid, probably not. Blue Williams, one of the stars of the Mario episode, the first one, shares with us how playground knowledge influenced the games that we loved. I talk about my beloved Aunt Nancy, who has questionable taste in video games, and some of the friends that we've made along the way. Check it out. Well, so that's the question then. How did you I guess a lot of your game knowledge then, or kind of what to play, what not to play, came from, I'm assuming, tribal knowledge, like in the playground and such.
Yeah, basically it was what other kids at school were playing. And, it was funny because back then there was never a bad game because kids got so few games that every game you got was great. And you played it as if it was the best game ever.
I'd love to do a full series on my beloved Aunt Nancy. I love my Aunt Nancy. She's great. But my mom would buy games based off of Nintendo Power. I would tell her what to get, and she would procure said game, and I would get the good game, right?
Right.
But my aunt never got that list. So she would just go to like store rando and get random game. So I ended up with like James Bond Jr. on the Super Nintendo, or Journey to Silius, or like Tasmania. Why? NCAA basketball. I don't like basketball. I hate basketball. So I would love to do a series on all the games my aunt bought, because every interesting random game in the collection came from her.
That's the thought that counts, right?
That's great. Oh, I listen, and I love it now because I'm like, yeah, I have a real copy of Fester's Quest, like sitting someplace. Why not? That's cool.
Mm-hmm.
Not good, but cool. So you got a lot of your knowledge from friends on the playground. Did your knowledge of games kind of help you form connections to at school? Like, how did that kind of work?
Yes and no. We were always kind of behind. We were not the cool kids that had the games first. Mm-hmm. We were the ones who would, listen to everybody else talk about how great the game was, and then a couple of years later we would get it, and then we would like run and tell the kids, "Hey, we finally got blah blah blah," and they were like, "Yeah, nobody plays that anymore." So, like, okay.
Oh, that's a bummer. That's kind of lame. Well, it's interesting how that social strata works when you're a kid, right? Like,
right.
Huh. It's interesting who got there first. So NES hit. Did you guys get one as a family, or was it one of those family presents? My family was big on that. Like, here's the thing for everybody. And then my sister, who's 6 years younger, was like, "Yeah, really, everybody? It's for you and your brother. Yeah, it's you and Bobby. I know. It's not for me. It's a video game. It's not for me."
Yeah. It was something like that. The NES wasn't really on my radar when it first came out in '85. It was a few years later. And then I remember the kids across the street, they got one and they said, "Hey, come over and play a video game." And I was like, "What? You have video games in your house?"
Wow.
So we went over and packed into their tiny living room, and we all played Super Mario Brothers. And after we had gone over there, I think every spare second we were allowed for probably like 2 weeks. I think eventually my dad was like, "Okay, if we ever want to see our children again, we'd better just get one of these."
Wow. So they realized very quickly that if they want to maintain the family unit, this needs to be the glue. I get it.
Otherwise, we were going to all ask to be adopted over there.
Right? Take a permanent residence,
Yep.
That's pretty cool. So all five of you crammed into this one living room and invaded.
Well, not all five of us.
Okay. Oh, yeah, because you're the oldest. Yeah.
I'm the oldest, so I got to go first.
Gotcha.
And I took like the next two with me, and then the youngest ones, they couldn't have played anyway.
Yeah, okay. I keep forgetting you're the oldest. That's right. Mm-hmm. That's fun. What a cool, and kind of and did you know the neighbors very well beforehand? Like, were they kind of friends of the family?
Yeah, it actually worked out because their oldest girl was my best friend at the time, one of my best friends. So it worked perfect.
Very nice. And of course, the game was Mario Brothers.
Right.
That was the one.
That was the one. That's where it really started.
And now it is time for some spicy hot takes. Oh, man. Wait till you hear this one. Sorry, I shouldn't oversell it. But it's pretty neat. It's an interesting perspective on Duck Hunt. Blue also shares with us how to cheat their siblings and also steal screen time from your parents. This is another salty one. All sorts of spice going on here. So let's just dive right in. So now when you got your Nintendo, I'm sure it came with Mario Brothers and Duck Hunt, right?
Right.
Did you play a lot with the Zapper and Duck Hunt too, or were you strictly Mario?
I don't know. People may hate me for saying this. I think Duck Hunt gets real boring real fast.
I don't blame you. It's more of a novelty for me. I agree.
Right.
With you. I agree.
And the most fun part about Duck Hunt is the fact that you can use the Player 2 controller to control the duck. And
I always forget that.
Yeah.
Yes.
So the cool part was when you knew it, but your younger siblings didn't know it.
Oh no.
That's when Duck Hunt was at its most fun. And of course, eventually they catch on, and then you're like, well, I guess I'm done with this game.
Oh my gosh, that's so funny. That's really good. Listen, you were born first. So you get to use that advantage. I was the oldest from my siblings too. And guess what? I was always the banker in Monopoly. That's how it worked. And guess what? Some extra money should end up on my pile. It's fine. Don't worry about it. So that's really to the point. I'll be honest, to the point where once they caught on and caught me cheating, they decide to not. They call me out like, Billy, I think you're cheating. To which I had to say, well, fine, I'm not playing anymore, and then never play with them again. I said, that's it. I'm not playing anymore. If I can't cheat, forget it. Forget it. Anyway, so that's cool.
It's the eldest fee percentage. That's all it is. It's not cheating. It's just that's how the math works.
It's called taxes.
Yes.
Kids, all right. You'll learn. You will learn what these things are. Very interesting. So so cheating your siblings. I think that's a rite of passage really for anyone who's the eldest in the family. I think that's really good. I love how you and your sisters kind of like circumvented the rules and kind of like found your own ways. I remember on Story Mode you told a quick story about how you and your sisters used to share screen time or used to stack up screen time.
Yep.
What was that one about?
So, like I said, we had a half-hour limit of screen time. But if you're going to beat a game like Super Mario 3, you need more than a half hour. Or at least we did. I don't know what the speed running record is for that or anything. But as kids, we needed more time. So we started off where we would each take a turn. Like instead of... Because technically what it should have been is if one of us was playing and the other two were watching, that should have counted as our half hour for all of us, is what my parents would have said. But then we said, well, they're not really watching. They're just sitting with me. And so then we said they could each have their half hour so we could all have a chance at trying to beat the game. But of course we couldn't do it. So then we started to stack our half hours together. So like one of the younger ones would play first when it was easiest. And then they'd tag in another one and they'd play for a half hour, tag in another one. And I'd play for half an hour and see if we could do it that way. But we still couldn't do it. So then the final straw was when they donated their half hour of TV time to me. So I could sit there and play for hour and a half, 2 hours and see if I could beat it by myself. It was a lot of pressure to have all of them, like their hopes and dreams riding on my skills at Mario 3. And
you literally have this timer running in the back of your head.
I know, it's so stressful.
Oh my God. Mario 3 is not an easy game. That's so funny.
No, and you're talking about, you shouldn't use the cheats. Well, if we knew of a cheat back then, we were going to friggin' use it because we were just trying to get to the end.
God, and you didn't even have the power, Nintendo power. So
nope.
you didn't have like the warp whistles or okay, interesting.
No, I had a distant friend at the time. It was like a family that we'd been friends with, and then we moved, and then like every couple years they would send the kids to come visit. And I remember one year they got there and I was like, hey, guess what? I can get to World 6 in Mario 3. And he was like, I beat that years ago. So, and I was like, gosh darn it. I'm trying so hard.
You need some validation. Someone should have been like, good for you. That's awesome.
Yeah.
Oh, of course, crappy kids and go like, whatever.
Yeah,
been there, done that.
Whatever. Yeah.
But that's cool. I mean, I think that's really funny that you guys kind of again banded. Yeah, you banded together to conquer the game. And did you end up doing it within your 2 hours that ended up being, or 2.5?
We never did as kids. Never did. It was not until I was an adult and I sat down without time limits and beat it myself. And then I text all my sisters, was like, hey, I finally did it.
Awesome. I'm sure that was a big celebration, right? Everyone was probably like super stoked.
Yeah. Well, now that we're all grown, they've all kind of gone away from games, and it's just me that has stayed with it. But they were still happy for me.
Oh, of course. Yeah. How could you not be? That's really, really sweet. That's a very cool anecdote. I like that. Awesome. Very good. Let me just go. Next up, we have Trevor from the New Dad Gaming Podcast. And this is a segment that falls really close to my heart. I almost want to just do this as its own episode, and I still might, as kind of a roundtable between Trevor, his co-host, and myself, just talking about this topic because I think it's really interesting. Talking about introducing our kids to games. Video games are, of course, amazing, and we definitely want our kids to experience games as part of play. And but introducing them can be challenging because we don't want to breed frustration, right? It's a balancing act. So we talk about introducing our kids to games, gaming with our family, whether games have just gotten too big, spoiler alert, they kind of have, and the joys of pixel art. Let's jump into it. How has your experience of discovering games as a kid with your family, how's that influenced you in helping your kids discover games as a dad?
Yeah, I'd say it's been almost like tepid and cautious, if you could believe that. It's
Sure.
Because I suppose what in coming up with games, and especially in these later years, when you see what the market has done, to know that there's a certain ill that can be gotten from games. So with monetization, with replay loops, with hooking players, with custom, all that stuff. Like there's a certain, I don't want to call it danger because that really oversells it, but there's a certain concern and level of care that I think needs to be placed on modern games.
Sure.
So when it came time to, maybe see if my son was interested, it's really about choosing the entry point, putting barriers around it so that it's a very much a focused, thought through process. Like, I don't care to put the weight of the world on it. Like, these are just games.
Right.
This is really great father-son bonding time. So I'm not trying to build this up as the biggest hurdle a father would face. But
Right.
it just, I didn't want to do it ham-fisted too much too soon, or recklessly, if you would. So what did come about was he became to get really interested in it. Like, I think he'd caught me playing something at one point, and the first game he'd ever played was Rocket League on Nintendo Switch. And it was, so big soccer ball, big, beautiful, bright colors,
Sure.
explosions when you score, race cars. Like, what's not to like?
Exactly.
And as far as the title, I thought it was a fairly good entry point, and he was terrible at it. Like, the only thing we'd do was he would back up into his own net, let me score just so we could be thrown away. Laughter ensues, and then repeat, like, ad nauseum, over and over. But there we were, if we were playing, and it was very much a, gamer dad dream come true.
That is really cool. I've had the same experience with my son where I'm very careful, more because games are so. It's pixie sticks. Like, it's so vibrant, explosive. Like, it's almost like a kid's brain. It's hard to handle too much of it at once, I think, because they're kids. They're just constantly absorbing. A tree can't hang with Rocket League, right? It's just, it can, just like broccoli can't hang with a Milky Way, but it's fine once in a while. And I'm trying to, I kind of approach it the same way. I started him on something like Mario 2, Mario 3, or
Nice.
Legend of Zelda, and he's not ready for that. He's just not ready. He can't figure out. He gets frustrated. He can't figure out D-pad and the A and B button at the same time. It's either one or the other for him. He can't do both. Okay, he's not ready. Get him on Mario Kart. He loves Mario Kart.
There we go.
That's the game for him. And he likes it because I put on the easy stuff. He can't fall off the track. Kind of auto accelerates if he forgets. He doesn't have to get good just yet. He's 5. It's fine. Loves that. Very empowering. He gets excited. I will tell you a very quick story. A couple days ago, I had to put my foot down on the games. He was playing Mario Kart and he lost, and he got really frustrated. He got screaming, and that's not cool. It's like no one wants to play with you if you're going to do that. So you know what, Will? I don't think you can play games anymore. This is what I said to him. I said, you know what? No games, no games until you're 5. That's it. His birthday's in like 3 weeks. So it's not like this big crushing thing. But I'm like, once you're old enough, because you have to learn. Like, you can't just sit there and throw things and cause a fit because you got in 3rd place on like, one of the star level, tracks, a hard track. So anyway,
it is a wildly powerful lever, I've found, because you calling it pixie sticks, like that is so apt. Like that's a perfect description, and it really guides much of his behavior. Where it's, we need you to try a little harder in school. Like otherwise you can't be playing games. You need to be nice to your brother. Otherwise you're going to lose your game. Like it's very much the key we found in some ways where it's very much his thing. Like he likes it. And thus far, to be clear, like his brother doesn't seem to like it as much, his younger brother. So that I have a 5 and a 3-year-old. Right. Even at 3, the other one had started to show interest. Currently the 3-year-old doesn't seem to care one iota. So I don't know that I'll have the same key to him. But for the older one, it's very much, and it sounds like you're in a similar way, if you'd agree, that it becomes this really great driver, like this carrot that like if you try hard, if you're good, if you're polite, if you're doing what we need you to, like we can have this great experience. I don't know if you're kind of finding the same.
Yeah, very similar. For me, I try to. It's very similar to what you're saying. For me, I've kind of using it as this is a fun thing we get to do together. This is also a thing he has to do himself. He's bizarrely independent. Like he wants to do everything himself. It's strange. So he wants to sit up there with the Switch and just play Mario Kart and enjoy himself. And sometimes he wants to be there and sometimes he doesn't, right? Sometimes he's like, I just want to play Mario Kart. I'm like, okay. It's like dangling the carrot for him to get, it's as a reward. I think it's good as a reward. I also do use it as more of a consequence. You can't have this if you've misbehaved, if you've done something you're not supposed to do. Now you're going to be denied this thing that you can just have. So it's interesting. We're kind of utilizing it in the same way, I think, just from different angles. It's just gotta be careful with it. I think with kids, again, it's so enthralling. It can dominate. I want him to go outside and play. Like today, he was not allowed to play games. He's just because he lost that a couple days ago, and he got into. I picked him up from school. And he goes, "It's like, Dad, it's like, so I can't play games today." I'm like, "No, Will, there's no games." And he starts throwing a thing. I'm like, "Well, hang on, Will, wait a second before you scream." This is how I talk to my son. I'm sorry. Before you scream, I'm from New Jersey. I'm allowed to do that. Before you start screaming, there's a beautiful day outside. After dinner, we'll go outside. You can ride your scooter. You could ride your bike. We can throw the football around, play hockey, whatever you want to do. We can do lots of other things than play games. I mean, a lovely, lovely evening playing hockey and football and all the rest of it. So, yeah.
No, I'd just actually be curious because the one thing that I want to keep tabs on is, I don't have, you might remember like when we were growing up, there's this terrible stigma with those who played video games. Totally. The nerds, like shut-ins, whatever you'd like to call it. I think that's certainly lessened now, which is really great. So I don't come at it from that angle, but at the same time, I do have some concerns as they're growing to ensure that there's a balance. Because I adore that you're saying outdoors, hockey, playing it around. Like, I don't want to enforce sports on my son in that you will play hockey. But at the same time, it's like you need to do something physical. You need to appreciate the outdoors. Gaming is amazing, and like we're going to have a lot of fun playing it, but just be clear, like, that's not it. Like for leisure, like we're going to do a lot of other physical things too. I don't know if you share some of those same concerns about trying to strike that balance with them.
It's again, it kind of talking about, how I grew up with games, and just as an adult and you as well, how I grew up with it was I wasn't into sports at all. I played hockey. That was my only thing I did sports wise, and everything else were games. So I felt like my experience was very one noted, where I want him to have a wide variety. I always say to him and my wife, we agree, I don't care what he's into. Be into it. If you're into games, cool. If not, that's fine. You don't like hockey? You live in Texas now. There's very little chance you're going to be into hockey. I get it. It's fine. It's okay. You can be into football. It's cool. Yeah, he can be into whatever sport you want. We let him try any sport. He's doing swimming lessons now.
Great.
Why not? Because try it. Do it. I don't care. And games can be a part of that because I think it's a good part of it. I think games are really good. It's play. And I think play, and I've said this on other shows and whatnot, but play is an elemental thing. So whether you're playing in a sandbox or playing with friends or playing a video game, it's exercising a piece of our brains that needs to be worked. And it's a piece of our brains that stop working as much as we get older. Do I think games are even more crucial? Play is more crucial as we get older because it's spurring creativity and different ways of thought. And it's just exercising other things that sometimes lie dormant because we have other responsibilities. So I think play is so vital. And I however you engage in that play is great. So if you're into games, awesome. If not, that's fine too. But find your enjoyment. Find that thing that allows you to experience, the joy of play.
The sense of play, for sure.
They do so much with so little, and that's the marvel of that medium. That's very difficult to reproduce now. Even if you're a pixel art developer, right? You have oceans of resources available to you from a computing standpoint. They did not have that back in 1985. So, yeah, it's very interesting.
Yeah, I think it's. Cool. I think it really speaks to the desire to bring back the retro aesthetic, where it's. You know what? We have too much tools. It's like you can create an absolute photorealistic person running through massive, like kilometer upon a kilometer city or mile upon mile city, and your modern systems, modern gameplay engines, modern consoles can handle it. That's too much. It's like too big. What if we brought it all back where it's only a 2D plane? There is very few pixels to work with. What could we do within those constraints to tell a grandiose story? So take the constraints, some of the more beautiful or interesting constraints of an 8-bit era, but layer upon it some of the more grandiose ideas around video games and the medium that it is and the stories it can tell. So the thought of these retro games coming about, I think some people would cast them aside in some ways to say it's just a nostalgia play and they don't want to work as hard. And I think instead it's actually just using, I heard this term once called beautiful handcuffs. Where it's like to be, it's to be constrained, but like it's such a gorgeous way that's going to cause you to be creative. You talk about creativity in the sense of play. So what if you can? Here's a very limited rule set with these 8 bits. Like, what can you do with modern ideas for video games juxtaposed against previous constraints?
Some of the greatest games ever made. Mario, Tetris. If you want to be more modern, Portal. It's very small very constrained set of actions and things you can do, and then developing games that allow you to do a multitude of things with those small constraints. So, which is play. That's just what it is. I give my kid a stick, and he goes in the backyard and he starts smacking the tree. That's all he's got. But he's playing, he's having a blast, he's making stuff up. That's kind of the heart of play, is it feeling good in your hands. So it's a really interesting point how you kind of talk about how the world of kind of like that pixel art is sometimes seen as, well, you guys just can't afford Unreal Engine 72, so clearly you have to stick with baby game graphics. And it's like, well, no, it's a choice. It's an aesthetic choice, and not just this nostalgia trip, right? Which I think is very quick shorthand for reviewers and journalists. You see that, it's like, oh, this guy just grew up with the SNES, so he's trying to make another Final Fantasy VI. Well, maybe not. Maybe they're trying to. A great example of that is a game To the Moon, if you've ever played that.
Oh, it's on my list because it receives such acclaim. So I imagine you've played it?
Yeah, it's the saddest damn thing you'll ever play in your life. It's just don't.
not.
Yeah, it's so sad. It's beautiful though. It's gorgeous.
Hmm.
And at first you look at it and like, oh well, this is just a Final Fantasy-esque as far as visuals go. There's not a ton of gameplay in it. It's more of a walking sim that's not third person, but it's gorgeous. The story is excellent. It's just really touching. But they're using that. It's not because of, ooh, I want a nostalgia trip. These are the tools I have. This is the medium I have. I have RPG Maker. The game was made in RPG Maker.
Wow.
So I'm going to make an amazing game in RPG Maker. And sure enough, they did. So, it's just different tools to either create stories or tell stories or just create games that are fun to play.
Yeah, absolutely. No, I do notice that a lot of retro games, and I think probably rightly, more focus on the 16-bit era as opposed to the 8-bit era, because as much as some of the titles truly did stand out, like graphics were pretty damn limited. Like this, it's a little much.
Yeah, definitely. The 8-bit. I always say the 16-bit era is a better era because than the 8-bit era, simply because it wasn't so much the graphical fidelity. When I'm doing like reviews and such for retro games, I can't say graphics. I can't be that simplistic because I can't compare 16-bit graphics to 8-bit graphics. I can say art. I say art direction. That I can compare the two. Does the art direction of this as opposed to this? Because then the medium itself is irrelevant. It's about how it looks from that kind of artistic standpoint. So, in that realm, I just think the 16-bit era they were just growing up. They were hitting their peak. They had their tools, which were the 8-bit tools. They had more of them, and now they were just creating just better stuff with an upgraded set of tools. And then, of course, you get to the PlayStation era, which I've always described as a teenage kid who's a teenager. It doesn't quite know what it is yet. It's all gangly elbows and angles, and it's awkward. Just trying to figure out what it is because it grew up a little too fast, and that's why those early PlayStation games are. Some of those are brutal.
Yeah,
back to those. And since he's going to be a regular contributor to this show, I figured I would take the last little bit of this first episode of Side Quests to properly introduce Joe Coiro. He's my best friend. He's been my best friend for over 30 years. I think 33 if you count up the ages. I'd rather not do that. But like I said in the initial Wizard episode, most of my gaming life has been wrapped up with him and through him in some way. So I figured let's just do the quick introduction of who Joey is, how we met. That way the table is set for the next year plus of A Gamer Looks at 40. Let's listen in. But we are joined today by a very special guest, a man who's known by only his closest friends as Joey 8-Bit. He's a man of many systems, the owner of many consoles, a collector, an
escapee of numerous asylums.
Yes. I ran out of steam. And a finisher of sentences, Mr. Joe Coiro.
Oh, thank you. What an intro. How can I even proceed with an intro like that? Thank you.
You're very welcome, man. So Joey and I have been best friends since 3rd grade.
Correct.
At Carteret School in Bloomfield, New Jersey.
Yep.
We met in 2nd grade. 2nd or 1st?
It was 2nd grade we met, December 1986.
Right, and your mom and my mom knew each other beforehand.
That's correct. Yep. I went to Demarest, which was a local school. I don't know why they put me there. I went from Sacred Heart to Demarest, and I was there for 2 or 3 marking periods, and I hated it. And my mother knew I hated it, and she said, "Well, you know what? There's one closer. Your friends are there. On my same street, I lived with Tom, Dave, Bill, and Paul Willie lived a street away. So everybody went there. I said, yeah, that's where I want to go. So that was midway of 2nd grade. I shouldn't say midway. So 2nd grade started September. It was 2 months in. Right. I started December in Carteret, 1986.
Gotcha. And when we first met, I don't think I was the biggest fan of you
No.
when we first met.
No.
We were not. So here's my question, is I don't remember these things and you do. What was the first thing that kind of brought us together?
Sure. Horror movies. The 1980s were very, very big with horror movies. The genre obviously didn't start there. It started generations prior with Mummy, Frankenstein, Dracula, etc. But it was the 1980s that there was a resurgence of new horror characters: Hellraiser,
Right.
Freddy, Jason, and it was very popular. They were very, very popular. So it was that was what got us as friends together. It was horror, and there was magazines, and then through that came Garbage Pail Kids, and then that came into music, and then that segued into Alf, and then video games. Believe it or not, was kind of last on the totem pole. Everything else was more front and center.
Yeah, it's funny when you mentioned a list of horror movies. I'm amazed that the first one you came up with was Hellraiser. Like, that's the first one. Like, not Freddy, Jason, anything else. Hellraiser, Wes Craven. Okay,
Yeah,
all right.
They were huge. They were big. Michael Myers. It was 3 years in, but the sequels all were the 80s. Chucky.
Yep.
I mean, I could go on and on. It was the decade of horror. The horror genre had a renaissance in the 1980s, and that's what really took us. Yeah.
And that wraps up the first edition of Side Quest Volume 1. A heartfelt thank you to all of my guests who took time out of their busy schedules to sit down with me for an hour to 2 hours, and in a couple of situations even longer, to just chat about games. There's going to be, I don't know, hundreds of these conversations over the next year. I have a list of at least a dozen people I need to call and schedule. This is going to be a project, and this is going to be a fun one, and I can't wait to share these stories with you because people are interesting. You are interesting. This is not a self-help talk. This is not one of those Tony Robbins things, but seriously, you as a person are interesting. Your experiences are valuable, and I can't wait to share some, if not all of them. If you're listening to this show, you can be on here as well. This is an inclusive thing. You don't need a fancy microphone. You don't need a fancy computer. All you need is a phone and a headset, and you can be a part of the show. So if you want to be a part of the show, connect with me on Twitter at @AGamerLooksAt40. My DMs are open, I think. If not, reply to one of the posts. I try to post daily on that page. Also, you can email me at agamerlooksaT40@gmail.com. Just let me know what you're interested in talking about, and if it's a story, don't tell the story. I just want to be surprised by it when we actually talk over the internet. Once again, thank you so much for listening to this show. It means a ton to me, and I look forward to talking to you next time on A Gamer Looks at 40.